Hey everyone, I am ready to get into today's live. If you're looking at the topic, we are going to be talking about how to prepare for a layoff. Now, you might be saying to yourself, like, I didn't even know I could prepare for a layoff. And the thing is, a lot of us are reactive in this situation when we do have the time, the space, and the energy to actually be preactive, proactive. Look at me, to be proactive in this situation. So if you are joining me live, or this is your first time seeing me live, joining in on the conversation, go ahead, say hi, let me know where you're watching in from. If you're joining in on the replay, please do the same thing. I go back and check the comments just to make sure that I'm answering all of the questions. So my name is Melissa Fleury, and I'm an executive coach and career coach at the Branded Career. The Branded Career is a coaching and consulting agency where we help mid and senior level professionals get the raises that they want, get the promotions that they want, and align themselves with fulfilling careers. So, with all of this talks about the layoffs and job loss, I wanted to make sure that you all are equipped with the tools that you need and even the strategy that you need to be prepared for this. And so, what sparked this conversation today is that I was reading an article. I was reading an article, and I was looking at the stats of just layoffs in the U.S. And so the stat came from Zappia.com, and it said that approximately 40% of Americans have been laid off once. So being laid off is something that's becoming way more common. Okay. I know when I first started my career, it was like only a select few of people got laid off. And the thing about it is that when I was actually laid off, I started to realize that it was a phenomenon that was so common amongst people. However, we carry it as if it's a bit shameful, as almost as if it was our fault. Honestly, sometimes when people are getting laid off, sometimes that weight and that guilt and that shame can almost make you feel like as if you got fired and it was your fault. So I think that getting laid off is something that's becoming way more common. And I think we also need to talk about the strategy behind how do we actually deal with a layoff. Because if 40% of Americans have been laid off at least once, then we know that it's something that we need to actively deal with. And another stat that I got from this site is that in 2022 alone, there were 15.4 million layoffs in the US. Now, this comes from various industries: retail, manufacturing, hospitality, food services, financial services. But we tend to only see that the tech industry is being laid off, or the big banks are laying off, and it's just these thousands and thousands of people that are being laid off from this specific industry, which is true. However, the layoffs are actually happening across a multitude of industries. And so, the first thing when it comes to getting prepared for a layoff is being really aware of the signs of a layoff. And so, the first thing that I want to talk about that you can actively go ahead and research, especially if your company is publicly traded, is the actual company performance. And so, if you're seeing quarter upon quarter where there is declined company performance, declined profitability, or just simply hitting performance marks, then that should be an indication that, okay, if the company is not doing good, then the next usually the largest expense aside from overhead is going to be the employees, and that's me. So I might need to start preparing for somewhere else to go. The next sign of a layoff is restructuring and downsizing. And this is something that I actually overlooked when I was laid off. And so what happened to me is that a couple months before my actual layoff, my group was actually downsized, right? And I didn't think anything of it. I'm just like, oh, wow, they're just being more efficient, just being very naive. And with that downsizing, that small group, my group actually ended up being the group that was laid off. And so, with downsizing and restructuring, you're seeing that positions are being eliminated, and then they're starting to consolidate departments. That's often a sign of of an upcoming layoff. Another thing is, aside from company performance, you have the budget cuts, right? You have those conversations where, oh, we don't have money for that. We're tightening up on expenses. And so if you're seeing that the budgets are just being cut, not just for frivolous things, but things that you need as far as like technology or even just actual body count in the office, and we'll talk about that, then that's probably a sign of a layoff. And so moving into the next point, that's another sign of a potential layoff, is that you have hiring freezes and you have reduced recruitment. Okay. And so I started to notice that anytime you get into a company and then you're trying to like refer your friends and they're like, oh no, we're going through a hiring freeze, or you're noticing that just recruitment is not happening. They're not going out on campuses anymore. You're not seeing jobs being posted online anymore. A lot of those efforts are just being reduced. And that's often a sign that they're not going to take in or bring in new talent because ultimately they're about to release, however many of their headcount in the next upcoming layoff. Something else that I've seen for upcoming layoffs or potential layoffs are management changes and leadership instability. And in my notes specifically is that if you're seeing a lot of your upper management suddenly resign or suddenly retire, that is often a sign that there's something going on that they don't want to be a part of. And that should be a cue for you to say that if they're just leaving out the blue, then something's going on and I need to start preparing myself because there might be a potential layoff happening. And the last sign, or one of the last signs that I wanted to bring up when it comes to a potential layoff that may be brewing in your company, is just low company morale and the rumors. And oftentimes I don't listen to rumors, I don't listen to the company gossip or any of those things. However, there are some people that are just in the know, that have great relationships where they're able to see the signs and hear the signs about a potential layoff happening. They may not be able to give you details. However, I find that when you're seeing that the company morale is low, if you're hearing the rumors of such and such is leaving, or this company, this department might get downsized, oftentimes it's true. And I've seen that in multiple positions. I've seen that with multiple companies. So that's something that I would say you all need to be aware of when you're thinking about, okay, how do I even figure out if I'm on the chopping block and about to be laid off? And so when you've gone through the signs of a layoff and maybe you're watching this live and you're saying to yourself, you know what, Melissa, there are a few things that you've hit on and they're actually happening right now. Well, I want to give you the tools to help you prepare so that you're not caught off guard if God forbid that you're the person that's laid off. And so the first thing that I want you to do is assess your current situation. And a lot of times we don't really think about our skills, our experiences until we're actually interviewing for that next position or we're actively trying to find a new position. And so this is the time where you really want to be introspective about where you are in your career. And something that I speak to my clients about is that I want you to be honest about whether or not you even like what you're doing, right? It's one thing to get laid off from a job that you love, but it's another to get laid off from a job that you just tolerated and you actually hate it, right? It's definitely a big bruise to your ego. And so I want you to be honest about, do I even like the job that I'm doing? Do I even like the company that I work for, right? And so with that, when you're able to be honest with yourself, now you've given yourself permission to start looking for other positions or even reimagining what your career could be if you were in a place where you could actually flourish. And so you want to start looking at, okay, I'm in a sales position, matter of fact, I'm in a sales position and I think I want to move to something that's not as commission based. Maybe I want to take the financial analysis aspect of sales and do that full time. So let's start looking at what are your current transferable skills, right? And another thing that I would say is that you want to start assessing your financial situation. And so I know a lot of us, when times are good, we out there spending, okay? Even when you look during COVID, when jobs were lost, or even for some people, they made a lot of money during COVID, like people didn't stop buying stuff. Like the economy did not stop. And so if you're in a place where you're thinking, you know what? There might be a layoff happening or there might be some downsizing happening, then you want to assess your current situation and make sure that you're starting to save, that you're starting to pay off debt. And we'll get into that just a little bit later. But you want to see, okay, financially, if I were to get laid off today, how long could I survive off of my current savings? And if you don't have a savings account, this is the time that you want to start building up your emergency expense fund, right? Because you don't want to be in a place where the only income that you have at a layoff is the unemployment income. And I hate to tell it to you, but unemployment income in most states, if not all, is really insufficient to cover your current lifestyle. Okay. If anything, it might be able to cover your rent and mortgage. If anything, it might be able to supplement it, but don't expect that you'll be able to live your current lifestyle based off of the unemployment income that you'll receive if, in fact, you are unemployed. The next thing that you want to be proactive about is building your professional network. You don't want to get laid off and then you start to hit up people on LinkedIn and Instagram or your text like, hey girl, I see you work for such and such. Mind you, you haven't spoken to that person in almost 15 years. Okay. So I would say now is the time that if you haven't reached out to your current network, start making those connections again, right? Start checking in with your mentors that are at other companies and really starting to develop those relationships again. I would just say lean into the relationships that are the most authentic and genuine to you. Because let's be honest, a lot of us know when you just want something, you really don't care how I'm doing in the email. So if you want to really build genuine relationships or rekindle those relationships, I think now is the time that you want to do that, right? Because you don't want to start reaching out and asking for a favor when you're in desperate need of it. But what's most comfortable is asking for a favor when you've already established a good relationship. And so if you're in the comments, definitely wave at me. Let me know if this is making sense to you all. And then drop any questions or comments in the box and I'll be sure to answer them. So with building your professional connection, you also want to take advantage of the fact that, we're post-COVID, post-lockup. So go outside, right? And I see a lot on my timeline. We're going outside to brunch. We're going outside to events and dinners and traveling and all that other stuff. But start going outside to those professional events. Like I think meeting in person with others, it really creates a connection that you don't necessarily get online. So like we've adapted really well to like meetings online, networking online, and doing everything online. But let's be honest, a lot of us are zoomed out. A lot of us are tired of the webinars and all of those things. So I think that if you can get outside and meet somebody face to face and establish like just that in-person connection, it just makes the connection just way more memorable than someone that you DM'd, a couple months ago. And the other thing is that if you can't get outside, then okay, let's start utilizing social media, right? And that could be anywhere from LinkedIn to TikTok, right? Because I think, and I've heard of other people, because I haven't done it myself on TikTok, I've done it on Instagram, but I've heard of people utilizing social media to build strong community. And I think that social media definitely has its place in the positive bucket, but you have to use it in a way that is most beneficial for you, where you're not just consuming content, but you're being strategic about the way that you're spending your times on the platform. So another way that you can get proactive about preparing for a layoff is enhancing your skills and your knowledge. So I think now is definitely the perfect time for you to start using those continuing education credits that you get from your job. If they're able to pay for any training, if they're able to pay for any certification, now is the time for you to take advantage of that, right? If you want to expand your HR knowledge, if you want to expand your agile or get your PMP licenses, like this is the prime time for you to do those things so that you're not scrambling to try to do them post layoff. Another thing is that you want to start to identify your skills gap. So remember in step number one, when we talked about assessing your current situation, if you realize that, okay, you know what, I'm not ready to move into a financial analyst position, or I'm not ready to move into this tech role, I'm not ready to move into an operations role. Like now is the time to figure out what do I need to do in order to be prepared and qualified for those roles. And so when I'm talking about preparation, I'm not talking about something that's going to happen in a day, a week, or maybe even a month. I'm talking about preparing for something in the next 3 to 6 months. If you even have time now, if your company has enough cash, maybe you can hold off maybe a year. But you don't want to get caught off guard when you're just sitting on your hands, when you actually could be preparing yourself for your next career move, which could actually be your next best move. And something else that you can do when you have gaps in your resume or gaps in your experience is that you want to start volunteering and taking on side projects. And something that I just want to learn, tell you personally for me is that after going through a layoff again, after going through a layoff the first time, I said to myself that if this ever happened to me again, I will never get caught off guard the way that I did, you know? And so this is where I stopped looking at my job as being the end game, as the only thing, as the best thing that I can get, and started really utilizing and seeing myself as a commodity and seeing my skills are a commodity, that my worth is not tied to a company, my worth is not tied to the actual paycheck, because my price is invaluable, right? Like there's no amount of money that you can put on my life, but there's a certain amount of money that you can put on the skills and the value that I deliver to your company. And when I started looking at myself as that, I stopped worrying about being laid off again, right? Even in 2020 when things were happening, and it was especially within commercial real estate, like credit tightened up a little bit, and then it was an outpouring, and that's a different different conversation. But I was looking at the industry and thinking like, wow, there's another layoff that's going to happen. And it did happen. Like I seen it at my own company. Saw it across different industries within the commercial real estate industry, but I was never worried because I knew and still know what my next goal is going to be. I know my financial situation. I know how long I could survive, with just my emergency fund. And I think I realized when you're way more proactive about potential situations that can happen within your career, you give yourself the opportunity to just move differently. Like I don't have the anxiety that a lot of my coworkers might have. And so like I don't have to really, partake in the doom and gloom of high inflation and the current economy because I already know my financial situation and I know my next plan. So you want to make sure that you're being as proactive as you can when it comes to your career development, because with 40% of Americans getting laid off at least once in their career, that means like it's highly probable that it might happen to you, right? Like let me know in the comment box if you've ever dealt with a layoff, or if you know of someone really close to you that has dealt with a layoff, right? Like if we're honest with ourselves, we know that it happens so much, so often, but we're not talking about it. And if we're not talking about it, we can't be prepared for it. And I want you actually, if you were to speak to someone that was laid off before, and I think I'm going to poll this question, ask them what advice would they give someone in order to prepare for a layoff that they wish that they knew. So next up in preparing for a potential layoff is updating your resume and your online presence. And so updating your resume, I find that we only do that when we're reactive and we're looking for a new job. And how much easier would it be if you already had your resume looked at, if you already had your resume just solidified with highlighting your experiences, highlighting your values, and that if you were laid off, the next thing that you had to do is just actually start applying with that resume. Like it would take so much weight off of your shoulders if your resume was done, if your LinkedIn profile was actually not only updated, but you started to utilize your LinkedIn profile as well as your cover letter or any other documents that you need as far as your career portfolio. Like how much easier would it be for you to really navigate a layoff if you have these things that were done? So now is the time that you should really just get into it and say, you know what? Let me just update my resume, but not only update my resume, be very intentional about what I'm putting in on my resume. Because something that I find that a lot of us do is that we just use our resume as a work history, right? It's just a job description of things that we've done and we place it in chronological order. But in actuality, your resume is really your billboard. Your resume is marketing you, your experiences, and your skills. And I think that your resume should be a reflection of your brand. So if your brand is not dry, if it's not, just boring, then your resume shouldn't read that way, right? It really should read the story about how your skills and experiences has elevated every company that you worked for. And so another thing with that is optimizing your LinkedIn profile as well as your other platforms. And so I find that a lot of us, and of course, this is your choice. LinkedIn is your professional network. This is where you do your professional posts. You talk about your professional history or any of your interests. But you can actually utilize your Facebook profile, your LinkedIn, not your LinkedIn, your Instagram to reflect your profession. Like your Instagram doesn't have to be about, pictures to Greece or your food that you're eating at brunch. Like your Instagram could be a reflection of or a collection of the work that you've done, your interests, and this is also how you're able to build community. Because if people are searching hashtags for professional advisors or hashtags for commercial real estate professionals, and you have consistent content that you posted within your Instagram, like that might also be a prime place for you to find your next job. So don't overlook other social media platforms thinking that, oh, I could be lax on them, when in actuality, they can be opportunities for you to find those new experiences. The next thing, and this is super important, you want to develop your emergency fund. If you do not have 3 to 6 months of expenses within a liquid account, you need to start building that now. And I realized that, and it was a little bit too late for me. So when I was laid off, and actually, I talk about it in my book called The Unemployment Guide: How a Setback Can Launch Your Career. You can find this book on Amazon, honestly, any major retailers, or you can find this book on my website, www.thebrandedcareer.com. And so in this book, getting laid off was the first time I realized how financially unstable I was. Okay. And so you'll hear the stats that a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck, right? And at that time, if I look back at it, oh, I was living paycheck, paycheck. I barely was in the two. Okay. Like as soon as one check was deposited, it was gone. Okay. And when I was laid off, I had to look at all of my expenses and say, yo, like, how did I get all of this credit card debt? Right. Like, why don't I have a sufficient savings account? And so I had to pull together all of like little accounts that I'd had here and there. And I had to develop a financial plan of how could I sustain my current expenses? And when I realized I couldn't sustain my current expenses, and this is why I say unemployment income from your state is not going to sustain your current lifestyle, I had to start realizing that, okay, how do I reduce my expenses? And within the book, I talk about how I literally go back home to my parents' basement where I start from scratch, not only in my career, but financially as well. And so you want to be in a position right now that if you have a steady paycheck and you have a surplus, start paying off your debt. Okay. Because trust me, when I tell you, Sally Mae don't care that you don't have a job. Citi Card don't care that you don't have a job. American Express don't care that you have a job. They all want their money. Okay. So you want to make sure that if you are in a financial place where you can pay off your debt now, start doing that now. The next thing is that you want to, of course, reduce your expenses. So if you are nearing the end of your lease and you've already said to yourself, you know what, this rent that I'm paying is a little too high, let's start looking for something that's a little bit cheaper. Okay. Maybe pulling back on traveling as much, pulling back on eating as much. Like all of these things definitely add up. Another thing that I tell you, I definitely encourage you all to do is that utilize all of your health insurance benefits. So that means that if you haven't been to the doctor in 2 years, go ahead and make that appointment with your PCP, your specialist, go to the nutritionist, seek out therapy, like do all of these things that you take for granted while you have a job. Because when you're trying to navigate the health insurance as an unemployed person, it's very difficult and it's very expensive. Okay. And so I say that if you can at least get your clean bill of health right now and know that, okay, you know what, I'm at least good. My blood work's good. My body's good. Then it takes off, you thinking about, okay, dang, what happens if I have to go to a hospital, right? And you might not have to think about that because you know that you have a clean bill of health. So I would say like definitely take advantage of all of your health insurance benefits right now if you're starting to hear the rumors that, you know what, we might have a potential layoff at my company. And so with the next point, explore the job market, right? I want you to start having informational interviews. So if you're thinking about transitioning careers or pivoting careers, this is a good time to start saying I always say, like, I think it's easier to find a job when you have a job already. Okay. So this is a good place to say, like, hey, I've been in my career for the last 7 years. These are things that I've done. And it's really been a good time, but my passions are shifting and I'm seeking to transition from sales into financial services, right? And I think that that becomes a bit more of a better story to tell than, look, I'm laid off and I need a job. What you got for me? Okay. And the thing is, gratefully, we are in a market where, like I said, layoffs are so frequent that, the help and the assistance is definitely there. But I would say for you, it's better to be proactive than to be reactive in your job search. Okay. So you want to start actively seeing, okay, what are the roles that are out there in the market? What are the titles that they're recruiting for? Also, what is the pay that they're recruiting for, so that you can start to assess your financial situation and see if it makes sense for you to make that pivot. You also want to utilize your current network for potential leads and start asking, like, hey, how's the hiring situation at your company? What are you seeing within your industry? Because I believe that a lot of the jobs that, we get are really not going to be the ones that are posted online, but they're really going to be the jobs that you hear the whispers from your current network. And the last point that I want to make when it comes to preparing for a layoff and ensuring that you are being proactive and not reactive in this process is developing mental fortitude. And the reason why I say that mental fortitude is so important is that when you lose your job, for many of us, our jobs our jobs are our identity. Okay, I couldn't get that; it was a tongue tie. Our our jobs are our identity. Okay, and the thing is that even if you don't like your job, and I talk about it in my book that I wasn't necessarily in love with my career or my role, but you don't realize how much of your identity it is until it's taken away. And I would go out and I'm from New York. And one of the things that the first questions that people ask you right after what is your name is, oh, what do you do? And to be in a situation where I didn't have, that job title, I couldn't say I worked for this company, right? I started to realize how much it was tied to my identity and my self-worth. And so start asking yourself hard questions right now. And that means, taking advantage of the therapy from your insurance benefits. But start asking asking yourself the question right now, mentally, am I tough? And by tough, I don't mean that things don't affect you and you're stone faced all the time. But do you have the resilience to bounce back quickly from situations? And for most of us, it's we wallow in our pity. We wallow in, woe is me and the things that have happened to me for way too long. And that in turn affects us when we need to be in situations when we're proactive and moving forward. And so developing mental fortitude means building confidence and building self-worth and self-esteem. And if those are issues that you find that, okay, I don't necessarily have the best confidence, this is the time for you to start asking yourself, how can I build the confidence in myself? And confidence is really self-trust. And another thing that I realized is that the reason that I wasn't confident in myself is that I didn't trust myself. And the reason that I didn't trust myself is because I never really, I never really honored the commitments that I said to myself, that I made to myself. So small commitments like, oh, I'm going to go to the gym. Small commitments of I'm going to eat better. Small commitments, I'm going to manage my money better. And I never did those things. And every time you don't honor the commitments that you make to yourself, you secretly, internally don't trust yourself. So then when you don't trust yourself, you don't have confidence that you can step out and do big things. You don't have confidence that you can step out and negotiate your salary. You don't have confidence that you can step out into a new VP role, right? Like confidence is not about just showing up and saying, I have no flaws, but confidence is really about showing up and saying, hey, you know what? I haven't done this before, but past experiences have taught me that when I show up for myself, I either learn or I grow or I succeed. Like there really is no failure. Um, yes, Joe. Yeah, it is self sabotage. It really is. And so the thing about like just getting laid off and being unemployed, hold on. I think I just lost Instagram. Okay, Instagram is still there. Okay. Um, yeah. So like with being unemployed, like you really have no excuse to not do the self work, right? Because you're no longer working. You don't want to go out because you don't want to spend the money. So it's like this is the perfect time to really reset. This is the perfect time for you to really transform yourself, or at least build a foundation to the person that you want to transform into. And so, with mental fortitude, it's about developing healthy coping mechanisms. And so, for me, during my layoff, I got into fitness, right? Because I said to myself, you know what? Fitness is the one thing that I can control in this situation. Like, I can control moving my body, I can control what I'm going to eat. And so, as I started to get like physically fit, I started to realize I started to become mentally fit as well, because as you're doing the resistance training and you're saying to yourself, all right, I got two more sets, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Like this transitions into, you know what, I'm going to show up for this job interview, I can do this. I'm super nervous, but I can do this. I'm going to negotiate my salary, and I'm super scared because I know that I don't have a job if they say no, but I need to do this, so I'm going to do this. Like physical fitness really does help with your mental fitness. Also, one of the things that I developed that helped me is journaling. The thing about journaling is that one, it helps you just to release all of your emotions in the moment. But one thing that I love about journaling is being able to go back and to read where your mindset was at a month ago, a year ago. Like I at least have 10 years worth of journals like on my bookshelf right now. And to see how much I have grown, like it really does help in, when you have those moments of saying, you know what, I don't know if this is working. I don't know if I'm growing, but then you see how you handled the situation 5 years ago, you're like, oh, snap, like I'm good. So it definitely helps in measuring your growth. Another thing is that you need to find ways, if you're a person that has anxiety, are you going to manage your anxiety, but then also digging into what is the root cause of your anxiety. And I realized that with my layoff, I talk about this a couple lives ago. I can't remember the title. When I do, I'll drop it in the comments. But this is a perfect place to start really rebuilding relationships and really forgiving those that have done you wrong. And I know you're thinking, like, what does this have to do with the layoff? Like, I just want to do my resume, do my LinkedIn, and find a new job. All right, cool. I'm going to tell you. So I started to realize that a lot of my relationships, whether those were family or friend relationships, like a lot of them were based on performance for me. Like I wanted to show up and have people be pleased with me. So there was the people pleasing aspect. And I just felt like I couldn't let people down. Right. And so I made certain decisions that I felt that, would appease my family and my friends. And when I didn't have a job anymore, right, I couldn't appease them that way, or what I thought was appeasing them. I started to realize, okay, what relationships do I actually want to nurture? Also, what relationships do I need to, really forgive for how people have treated me, or even ask for forgiveness for how I have treated them, right? And all of that really relates into the job search, because now I'm in a place where I'm no longer holding on to a lot of those negative thoughts. I'm no longer trying to people please. And I'm now in a space where I'm seeking out positions that are truly authentic to the place and the journey that I want to take my career. All right. And then lastly, when it comes to developing mental fortitude, is about developing a positive mindset. And developing a positive mindset does not mean that you're going to be happy 24/7, but a positive mindset means, how can I see the good even in the worst of situations, right? And with my faith, it's like I just think about the fact is that nothing that I have gone through is something that God is trying to hurt me, right? Nothing that I have gone through is something that God will waste and say it was a waste of your time. Like, I realize that when it comes to my faith, like everything, like the word says, everything is working out for my good, right? And so I just wanted to ensure with this live is that we're in a place right now where you're good, right? You're in a place right now where you have a good job, you have a good paycheck, things might be okay. Financially, you're not struggling too much. But at the end of the day, as long as we work for other people and as long as we work for other companies, we need to be prepared in knowing that we might get laid off at any moment. And when you're proactive and you're prepared, you're able to navigate the situation with just at least a little bit more ease. And so that is all that I had for you all today. Like I said, you can find my book, The Unemployment Guide: How a Setback Can Launch Your Career. If you're currently going through unemployment or know someone that's going through unemployment, this is definitely a book that can assist them in the journey. Also, for those of you that are saying, you know what, I'm not currently unemployed, but how can I work with you? I'm glad you asked because I have an upcoming masterclass called Accelerate Your Career. And we're going to be talking about how can you master the promotion process in 2023. Whether you want to get promoted at your job or you want to promote yourself as far as like the title and the salary with finding a new job, we're going to be going through that. We're less than a week away from this masterclass. It's completely free. It's next Thursday, May 25th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I will drop the link for you to register. It is completely free. Trust me, we have limited seats. I don't want a big class because I really want to keep it intimate so that we can answer your personal questions. And so if you have if you have any questions for me about this live or any comments, go ahead and drop them in the comment box and I will respond to you. Hope you all have a good weekend and I will talk to you on the next live.